Hey guys, this week rather, we are going to talk about the importance of setting. Every once in a while, I'm bouncing the camera, sorry. Every once in a while, the AP exam will talk about setting, and for some reason, it really trips people up. Despite the fact that we've talked about setting and how it affects things quite a bit, and you just may not remember it. Later on, I'm going to talk about one specific example, and once I say it, I'm sure you'll be like, oh yeah, we did talk about that. But first, I want to give you some notes. Now, on Canvas, you have a copy of the notes. I don't really care what you do. You could just watch the video. You could make a copy of the notes and then jot a few extra things down that I might say out loud, but definitely keep watching the video. Don't just look at the slideshow, because it really was meant to augment this lecture, not be in replace of the lecture, okay? Because I'm going to talk a lot that's not on the slideshow, but you don't have to write anything down. You're not turning anything in regard to notes. Just remember that on the AP exam, you can use any notes that you have. So, and in full disclosure, I don't know that it will be about setting, but I don't know that it won't be about setting. So, all right, so I'm going to flip the camera around so that you can see my screen, and we will learn together about how setting plays an important role and how you could write about it. All right, guys, here we go. Here are the notes that I have for you, and we'll talk about them. All right, so as I mentioned just before, you can take notes however you wish. Just remember, if you do have a physical copy of the notes, you will be able to use it on the exam if you need to. Okay, so why setting is important. First of all, it establishes mood or atmosphere of the narrative, so it kind of tells you from the get-go how you're supposed to be feeling in the way that they describe it. The environment, it tells us about the environment that the character inhabits and provides us information about that. So if we were looking at Ethan Frome and looking about, how Starkfield kind of shapes who he is, that's the importance of setting. And then setting and the details associated with it not only depict a time and place, so like the winter in Starkfield, is it Massachusetts? I think it's Massachusetts, but now I don't remember. But anyway, in Starkfield. But it also conveys the values associated with that setting. So we can kind of look at maybe the town of Starkfield and like the prevalence of the church, and how everybody kind of congregates around the post office right at the beginning when the narrator first encounters Ethan Frome. But anyway, so that's an example, using Ethan Frome, about several ways how setting can be important. Okay, so some things to consider when discussing setting. So if you were to get this on an AP question, you want to look at how it affects the narrator or characters. So in the Ethan Frome scenario, you kind of look at both, because the narrator is a character, but sometimes, like in The Tale of Two Cities, the narrator isn't important. It's just the characters that are important. And the way you would look at that would be through imagery and figurative language. And then you'll also look at the effects on the reader. What contrasts are there? What shifts are there? How does the setting affect characterization? So on and so forth. So that would affect the reader's experience, I guess, with the text. Okay? All right, so we're going to practice with, this was the first thing that came to mind when I started talking about setting, or knew that I was going to be talking about setting today, was A Tale of Two Cities and Chapter 5, The Wine Shop. So we're going to look at the wine shop and then look at these things, like the effect on for Tale of Two Cities, we're just going to focus on characters. We're going to look at the imagery and figurative language used, and also any contrast, shifts, and characterizations. Okay. Now I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because we did really look at it in some pretty big detail when we did it together in class. But you will remember, and I really wish I had my own book and I could like do screenshots of it instead, because it's going to be difficult to find the things that I'm talking about from this webpage. But so remember, the wine had fallen, or wait, I don't think here it had, yeah, here we go. That had stained the ground in the narrow streets of the suburb in Paris, where it had spilled. It had stained many hands, many faces, many naked feet, many wooden shoes. The hands of the man who sawed the wood left red marks on the billets, the forehead of the woman who nursed her baby. It was stained with a stain of the old rag she wound around her head again. So we see some of the poverty here. And then up here too, in this paragraph, we kind of see different things that are tell us a lot about the characters. The men with bare arms back in that time period, even when it was hot outside, you didn't wear short sleeves, like you wore long sleeves. Matted locks or hair, cadaverous faces. Wow, what a term that kind of really tells us about how hungry they are, because they look almost dead. And it talks about the gloom, and so we see a lot of things. I'm going to flip back to this real quick. Oops. And we see a lot of imagery and figurative language with the characters that tell us a lot about who they are. In the short little part that we looked at, we didn't look much at this, but I think that if you look back on the passage in more detail, you could definitely see those shifts. I mean, I do remember there's a shift when the wine spills, and then when everybody gets back to their regularly scheduled lives, when the wine is gone. And those things kind of become important. Excuse me while I scratch my nose. When you go to write about setting. Okay, so in more detail, you're going to look at another piece of literature from the handout. But first I want you to talk to you about the chart, because last time I didn't do that and I think it was a little confusing. Okay, so I got this idea from another AP English teacher. I'm going to make this big. And I kind of adapted it. This isn't exactly what hers looked like. But what I want you to do is, I set this up for the wine shop with Tale of Two Cities, because I figured we would talk about that together a little bit here in this. Well, we won't talk about, I will talk at you about it. But looking at imagery, so give me a specific piece of imagery, maybe that part where we talked about the faces, cadaverous faces. Here we go. So like here, like if we looked at this part right here, that could be our imagery. And then going back here, we would look at what kind of figurative language was used. So we have a lot of visual imagery with the faces. We have a lot of parallel structure where it talks about the different ways they looked and things like that. So you'll look at figurative language, and then the effects on the character, how that setting affects the characters. Now we don't have our main characters in this point. Now you could look at it later on when we have Madame and Monsieur Defarge, because that definitely has an effect on their character. And then once you have this done, you've got a couple of examples here. Oh, I meant to merge these so yours will look different. Hold on. Where is that? Merge cells. Okay, so I want you to find one example of imagery and another example of imagery, some figurative language with each. So this piece of imagery has this figurative language and this effect, and this piece of imagery has this kind of figurative language, which has this effect. But then I want you to look at both of these as a whole. Like, what is the function of these pieces of imagery surrounding the setting? Okay, like what tone does it set? What mood does it set? What kind of contrasts are there? Now, in the wine shop, we don't have a ton of contrast, but what would be really cool is if there was an example of like how the upper echelon lived and then the wine shop. So like the chapter with the marquis like drinking his chocolate, and then the wine shop, like if that were the excerpt, that would be a huge example of contrast. And the function of that is it shows the massive disparity between the two kind of castes of society back then. Okay, so I gave you an example of this using Tale of Two Cities. So back to our presentation, we're going to, I'm going to flip ahead in the presentation and then we'll pop back. But you're going to use the other prompt. So your homework, so to speak, is not about Tale of Two Cities. Okay, that was our example that I talked about to just kind of highlight something with something you'd already read before. Okay, so like if we had been in class, we would have spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes on this with Tale of Two Cities and then popped out and just used the same handout to talk about this prompt that I linked for you on Canvas. So picking up that prompt, I want you to make annotations on the text if possible. So if you have a printer where you can print it off, that would be great. If not, just kind of take notes, or if you know how to annotate on the computer, you could do that. And then fill out the handout that we just talked about, but not for Tale of Two Cities. Change where it says Tale of Two Cities and put the title of the text that we're looking at. And you're going to, quote unquote, bring that with you to Wednesday's meet. You don't need to turn it in anywhere, but you're going to bring it with you, and that's going to kind of fuel our conversation. Then Thursday, or at least Wednesday after the meet, you can write the essay with the prompt that's on the paper. Last time I had you use a different prompt, but this time I want you to use the prompt that is on the paper. And as I just mentioned, please refrain from writing until after our meet on Wednesday in case you have any misconceptions or something. Okay, so now going back up. So as you look at this new passage, I want you to think about these 4 things. What details in the setting are important? What effect does it have on the character or characters or narrator? And what effect does it have on the reader? So that would be like tone. What kind of tone does it set? And like we just talked about too, what contrasts are there? The reason why contrasts are so important with the AP essay is, remember, you have to have that element of complexity, and contrasts help with that. Okay, so think about those things as you read through the prompt. I'll go ahead and pull up that prompt. Oh, I don't have it easily accessible. Okay, so I won't pull up the prompt. But I do want you to come to the session on Wednesday prepared with ideas about what you would write about. So look at the prompt, look at the passage, fill out the setting analysis sheet that I attached for you, and then we'll talk about it on Wednesday. I hope you guys are doing well. Today is actually Wednesday for me. We haven't met yet, so I'm excited about our first actual like class meet, not just chit-chatting and stuff. But I hope it goes well. I miss you guys, and I hope you're all doing well. Take care.